waiting a few minutes while other people join. Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Perfect. Let's give a couple more minutes and then get started. So usually how this works, I will share my screen of the practice question forum and then go through either recently answered questions while I give feedback, or if you have any questions queued up that you want me to address, I'll address those first. So if you have any questions that you want me to go over, please post them on the chat and I'll go through them. Hey, Haley, thanks for joining. We're just giving a couple more minutes while other people join. If you have any questions that you want me to address first, please post it on the chat. Let me share my screen. Cool. Awesome. So since I don't have a request yet, yeah, please post up your question on the chat if you have any question that you want me to go over. Otherwise, I'll go through maybe one question from recent answers. Maybe if you have, do you guys have any question type that you want me to go over today? Product design, estimation, execution, whatever, or we can just pick randomly.
Could we possibly do product design?
Sure, absolutely.
Cool.
So how this works is I'll go through a submitted question, and in the process of leaving feedback to the answer, I'll kind of explain my thought process, take your questions, and we can kind of discuss together. Cool. This problem seems pretty interesting. So Google wants to end the problem of fake drugs. What would you build as a lead PM on this project? I think it's a pretty interesting problem to solve. So let's go through it. Nia's answers. Clarification. What do you mean by fake drugs? Drugs that are counterfeit and not approved by the FDA. Fake drugs is a big problem and can even lead to someone's death. For this question, I plan to focus on the US market and drugs that can be bought over the counter. Does not need a doctor's prescription. For prescription drugs, pharmacists play a key role in ensuring the doctor's prescription is correct, and pharmacists can also police fake drugs. Therefore, I will focus on over-the-counter drugs. Here is how I plan to address the problem. Okay, cool. Good scope and initial clarification. I wonder, a few more questions I have about just counterfeit drugs is like how do these fake drugs actually get to over the counter? Is that the problem, or is there another distribution channel that people get these drugs, and that's what we want to solve for? So maybe if I were Niaz, I would probably ask a little more questions about the FDA process. How do fake drugs get even distributed at all? How big is the problem? That kind of stuff. But I think, yeah, the next process for Niaz is understand what is the drug industry and FDA is doing to address this issue. I think this will kind of clarify some of those questions. From user's point of view, understand their purchase journey for drugs. Makes sense. Yeah, and that will probably address the distribution channel and what can Google do to address this issue. Cool. Drug industry must be motivated to solve this problem because for drug industry, fake drugs impact trust and revenue for drug companies makes sense. FDA, they're motivated to keep US citizens safe, want to keep our fake drugs from the US market. Users can be broken down to self-diagnose, knows what to buy, maybe even Google. Yeah, and Google symptoms looking for drug recognition and potentially order drugs over the internet. Right, and I completely agree that I think for those who know what they're getting, like Advil or Nyquil, that's fine. But for people who have some rare symptoms or know that have some kind of a symptom and they kind of look up in Google and find and run into this fake drug, I think that could be a channel that is problematic, and that is something that Google has direct interface with, so that's the problem that you can solve. So I think I like this selection, and I like how Nias kind of lays out the different players in the ecosystem, drug industry, FDA, users, and their interests and their the role they're playing in the ecosystem. So far, this has kind of really helped us narrow down to the scope that we can clearly solve for, instead of just randomly start from the beginning, say, let's just solve end the problem of fake drugs. That's a pretty vague statement. So I like the narrow down so far. Vision, as Google, we should build the most trusted source for FDA approved drugs. Okay, FDA approved drugs or drugs in general, like what is fake or not, but solution, FDA authenticity endpoint. Work with the FDA to build an API endpoint that will receive encrypted data, which FDA can decrypt with its private key to authenticate a drug. Interesting. So this is some sort of a approval process API. I wonder how directly this solves the problem of what Nias pointed out as a problem, which is people Googling and running into fake drug information. And this seems to be solving more of that process. Let me read on and see what's going on. Indexing, all online retailers will need to register with the FDA to get a certificate to be able to sell drugs online. Online retailers are caught selling fake drugs, they will lose their certificate. As Google, it will only index retailers who have FDA certificate to sell drugs online. Okay, this is pretty cool. So this is leveraging Google's power per se, or Google's systems, and kind of coordinating with FDA to have this certificate and having that as part of as an online retailer. Basically a process for you to get indexed in Google. So that's interesting. I think this is pretty impactful solution. User drug discovery and verification. When user discovers drugs on Google search, they can be assured that only approved retailer pages will appear in the ads and organic section. When user order drugs and receive them in mail, the drugs could be fake. So to address this issue, each new over-the-counter drug bottle must have a QR code with encrypted data that has been encrypted with FDA public key. Users will be able to open their camera and use Google Lens to verify the authenticity of the drug. Google Lens in the background will make an API call to FDA to verify the authenticity of the drug. Okay, so this is of the later chain. This is attacking a different part of the distribution, where so actually these three solutions kind of attack different parts of the chain. One is just getting approval, making that process easier by building an API endpoint. And the second one is finding and discovery stuff on Google. And third one is actually getting it delivered. And even if you find stuff, if you get delivered fixed stuff, that could be an issue. So I'm trying to fix that. So that's interesting that kind of, yes, took a whole approach of looking at the different chains or funnels or the user journey for drugs and then kind of applied a solution for each. So that's interesting. Not sure what the queue looks like, but here's the one. Cool, awesome. Yeah, after this question, we can go through your request. Cool. So in summary, by building an ecosystem like this, we should be able to address the issue of fake drugs. Most purchase journey starts from Google, but bad actors still might reach users via email or other push methods. How does FDA obtain the data after it decrypts the data? What happens if FDA private key gets leaked? Okay, so I think this is an interesting answer, interesting problem. So seems like the solutions are kind of addressing different parts of the distribution channel or user journey. And I think I would have appreciated if Niaz kind of lays it out a little more upfront, a little more clearly here. After talking about the players in the ecosystem, maybe you could have gone into the users and their journey of getting drugs in general and where could be a vulnerability for fake drugs to enter in. It isn't super clear yet between here and the solutions, how he kind of captured this points of vulnerability. And I don't, and to be frank, this is a hard problem because no one really fully understands FDA process. So if I were Niaz, I think I would have asked a lot more questions about how this thing works, how this customers get fake drugs, how this customers get enough information, what data Google has. And a lot of these solutions kind of involves FDA in the chain. So a risk is, what if they're not willing to cooperate? What about privacy and data stuff? So how should Google address this issue? And if FDA is not willing to cooperate, what's like the plan B, or how could we address that risk? So my feedback in general is, so it's great that you lay out the different players in the ecosystem and that the solution addresses the different parts of the user journey and their points of vulnerability. However, since after you address FDA, drug industry user, you didn't clearly or comprehensively deconstruct and explain the user journey and the distribution chain. There was a bit of a disconnect between the problem that you're trying to solve and the solutions presented. So to reiterate, I knew we were solving the general problem of customers getting fake drugs, but I wasn't sure exactly what the problems were. Problems that were responsible for this was. So it wasn't clear. I don't know if this is super unsure exactly what. I knew that we were solving the general problem of customers getting fake drugs, but since it wasn't clearly explained why this was happening, at the end, I wasn't sure which exact problems we were solving for. And lastly, this is a hard problem since I don't fully comprehend the FDA approval process or the drug industry and the user journey there. So I would probably ask a lot more clarifying questions up front, or in the case of written response, make more upfront assumptions about how the process works, so it's more clear. It's clearer. Lastly, the biggest bottleneck of your solutions will probably be FDA. So there's a huge risk that they might not be willing to cooperate. And potential data privacy issues. How would you address these risks? And is there a plan B? is probably my feedback for this answer. So I kind of went through my analysis of the answer. Do you guys have any questions about any of these or anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you think, because do you think this might have been, I don't want to say stronger, but maybe something you could follow a little bit more if we stuck within the Google ecosystem? So let's just double down on Google Ads and what we do with AdWords, so we don't have to bring in all those external players to make it clear.
Yeah, I mean, as long as, so always the approach that I recommend is broaden up first, discover stuff, and then kind of narrow down quickly. So find the point that you really want to solve for. So as long as you describe, okay, this is like the whole process, but AdWords is like a huge problem because people kind of blast their fake drugs using Google Ads all the time. So that's the problem I'm solving for. That case, I kind of understand the broader chain, but I also understand that this is like a specific problem that's really impactful you want to solve for. So that's easier for you to solve for, and that's easier for the interviewer to understand what we're going after. So I think that would have made that answer perhaps a little stronger. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Cool. And Alec,
I have a question here. The questions like this, right? So the candidate or someone who interviews, they might not be knowing all the players for the
yeah.
fake drug. So, how do you suggest, like if there is some question that has been posed?
Yeah, so ask questions, kind of. So, but if you ask question, probably they'll like if you ask like broad or vague questions about like what is this or what is that, how does this work, they might say like what do you think. So usually like asking a question for product interviews, kind of lay out, okay, here's my understanding, is this correct, am I missing anything, is there any more players? So do that more to use your interviewer more. Always make your interviewer as your friend. Obviously you'll probably run into unfriendly ones from time to time, but usually they are down to help as long as you ask good questions. So I would urge you to do that. And also, like that is one approach if you get enough data points. But in cases that you don't have all the data, just focus on the problems that you know for sure. So as Jessica suggested, if you are aware of Google at least and how people Google drugs on search for Google drugs on Google, and there are fake drug ads, like that for sure, and that's a problem. So just focus after that. So like there are two approaches of getting more information by asking your interviewer, or just going after a specific segment that you are very aware of, so that there's no risk of not knowing what exactly not knowing what you're talking about, or having enough details there. Alex, should he have defined what fake means? For example, is it FDA? 100%. Yeah. Like, so I think Niaz kind of assumed that this is non-FDA approved drugs, but I was like one of the things, like what does fake exactly mean? So I think asking that or defining that would have helped the question a lot. Anything else, guys? Cool. We can go on. Question 97, Facebook newsfeed autoplay. Cool. Awesome. You're the PM for Facebook newsfeed. How would you decide whether or not to autoplay videos or make the videos click to play? This is an execution question asked by Facebook. Patrick, you had an answer here. Cool. How does the autoplay work? I presume it's how it's done today. Like no audio, start playing once the video scrolls. Okay. And desktop or mobile, which market is this? Users in US, Western Europe versus developing markets have different behaviors. Cool. Yeah, so great questions. Since this is a written answer, I think it would have been helpful if you kind of made a choice here. So yeah, as you did here, I presume it's how done today, and maybe we could go after mobile here. And this is a point where you could kind of show your insight. So when you ask this, which market is this? Because I know that US, Western Europe, and shopping markets have different behaviors. When you say this, I'm kind of curious. Okay, what is that different behavior? I kind of have an assumption, but I want to hear from you. And here, this is like your moment to shine, perhaps. So, like as you ask this question, say like in the US, I know this is the case. In Western Europe, I know this is the case. In developing markets, I know this is the case. So for this reason, this matters to this problem. Like, and is there any market that you want me to focus on? So I think whenever you have the opportunity to share your insights about a market or about a product, about the company, feel like take that opportunity. Goals and metrics, Facebook's mission. I had a question. Yeah. Cool. Goals and metrics. Facebook's mission is to help people build deeper connections as a newsfeed PM. I think someone else is joining. Cool. The newsfeed PM, the goal is to make sure Facebook newsfeed is valuable to the users by being a great way to keep in touch with friends. Cool. I always like for kind of a trade-off decision question, going after the Facebook's mission, the company goals and product goals and stuff like that. So primary goal should be boost time spent on Facebook feed. Okay. Yeah, less time on competing platforms. Boost user interaction. So user discovers a funny video and share them on their own. Yeah. Private message. Cool. So the two goals here, like I agree with it. And kind of lays out the Facebook mission as well as like a newsfeed product goal. And I like that there is like an example to kind of make these goals, each goal is a little more tangible. And other stakeholder goals. This decision will impact the Facebook videos team. I love that we are not only talking about one product at question, but thinking about other stakeholders, other teams, other products. That's the key between maybe like a good answer, maybe for junior PMs, but also like an excellent, great answer for senior PMs, where you can start to recognize the different dynamics and different interactions between teams and products within the company or outside the company. So Facebook video team, the ads team, and the Instagram TV team. Cool. These are the primary metrics. The number of videos watched, complete autoplay. Users spending more time watching video could mean less scrolling, which triggers fewer ads. Yeah, that is important. Cool, yeah. Autoplay will probably be a good thing for the video team. Could be a bad thing for the ads team. But since they're watching more video, we have more places to show ads. 100% engagement. Right. So if they spend more time on Facebook video, IGTV could suffer a little bit. Yeah. So these are great. It was since this is a written answer, it was a little unclear to kind of hard to decipher. But I think I get the messages that you're trying to say. So maybe we could have laid out like Facebook video, they care about these things, ads, they care about these things, Instagram TV cares about these things, and lay this out. But like the section is excellent in general. Decision-making criteria. I would run an experiment on autoplay versus click to play and make this based on which one has more positive impact on following metrics. Cool. Frequency of interaction with friends by private messaging, commenting, and rating. Yep, and time spent on Facebook newsfeed. Cool. Save users to click, lowering the barrier for the users to discover great ways to share with their metrics. Meanwhile, the primary one to watch would be monetization related metrics, but they right. Right. So yeah, having some sort of a criteria if like the ads on newsfeed go down, engagement with ads on newsfeed go down significantly, like we'll re-roll it. I think that makes sense. And the video related metrics are left out since autoplay would most likely win. Makes sense. Also left out since we work for Facebook newsfeed and are probably concerned with Facebook metrics. That makes sense. Yeah, we could probably work together with IGTV, but in general, I think our goal is to optimize for the newsfeed. So I think it's implied that you think autoplay is probably going to be a better decision here. And obviously we don't have all the data. We have to watch these metrics. So it's great that you mentioned these. So only feedback I would have for this answer is for this trade-off or decision question, it's always to, even with limited data, have a position that you want to stick to. They often say strong opinion weakly held. So I think having a side, even if you don't have all the data, would be important. So make assumptions. Like looking at these metrics, I think autoplay will have a better impact in terms of this and this and this. So I think we should do that unless discounter metrics kind of come into play like that. So I think here the only feedback. So to write out the feedback, great answer. I like the clarification question. Since this is a written answer, maybe you could have chosen side or made assumptions. How you start from the company product goals, and especially the fact that you consider different stakeholders in your decision. One of your clarifying question about which markets to consider is a great opportunity for you to share your insights about different markets and the user behaviors to differentiate yourself from other interviewers. Great set of metrics to look after, to monitor, driven by clearly set goals. Understand that we won't have all the data, but in an interview setting, it's important to decide a position and defend it strongly. So next time, you can probably choose. You can make assumptions about and choose a position to make your answer more assertive. So I think this is basically the feedback I'll give. And I think it's a great answer. So probably, I think this is an answer. Probably after the session, I'll comment it as a top answer for this question. Cool. Any question here, guys? Right. So Pat.
Yeah, I have a question here. So I like the answer, but shouldn't we start from discussing the problem itself? Why are we recommending click to play versus autoplay? I mean, would that be a bandwidth constraint? Or is that like because of low bandwidth? Does that give a bad user experience, thereby losing a lot of user engagement?
That's a great point. So something that I didn't actually consider here. So I think we set like our intention up here about the goals of more engagement and more time spent. But as you said, and I think that's where choosing the right market matters, because US, maybe this is probably not the concern. But for
no, even in the US, right? There is like people who are on 4G versus people who are
for
on
sure,
Wi-Fi. Yeah,
100%, 100%.
yeah, there is a
Yeah.
difference between user experience between these two segments itself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I think one more thing to add, one aspect that you could consider more is the user experience and bandwidth issues. That it is a big factor for making a decision between autoplay versus click to play. Yeah, great point here. Anything else, guys? And Pat, I think you had a question, or no? Yeah, so let me go through. So we glossed over, forgot to finish the answer, more video watching for ad clicks. Unfortunately, I didn't know how to add the answer. Okay. One question I have, this feels like a success metric question that requires more thinking. In these types of questions, would you jump straight to the top primary goals, being more comprehensive? Yeah, so I think always the recommended approach is kind of glossing over, kind of skimming through the comprehensive overview of the problem space and then narrowing down. And for this question, we kind of narrow down quickly to the primary goals, as you did. And I think that's probably one of the reasons we kind of forgot about the issue that Dev pointed out about user experience and bandwidth issue. So yeah, so maybe take a little more time in the beginning to kind of address the broader picture first, and then kind of narrow down fast enough. So like taking those couple minutes, I think won't hurt your answer. So does that make sense? Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the answer, and thanks for great feedback here, Dev. Next question we have in queue. I think it was yours, Dev. 6691. You are the PM for an e-commerce site. You see that sales have dropped 7% in the last few days. What could be wrong? Cool. This is like a execution, what's gonna debugging kind of a question. Cool. Let me go through. Since you have indicated that the drop has been from the past few days, and it is the sales drop. Assumption one is not a gradual decrease in something that has been in a few days. My assumption is the e-commerce site is a Google store site where Google sells all the products. Oh, got it. So not necessarily. So like I think there's this probably a UX issue on our end. When we list out Google, this question has been asked by Google doesn't necessarily mean it's a Google product or Google e-commerce site, but like for the context of this question, I think we can assume it's a Google site. Sure. Yeah, and in the last few days. Yeah, and 7% in the last few days, I think it's safely not even assume, like for sure say it's not a gradual decrease. So I agree. A very high level declines in sales caused by customers buying less on the site. Yeah, I like the high level breakdown. Customers are buying less, customers are churning, decline in new customers, higher cart abandonment rate, checkout process. Cool. And then, so this is good. I think we could put even more of a structure here to help us kind of analyze or explain the issue. So I think what you've done here is kind of explain the funnel, the user funnel for an e-commerce site. So we'll probably start with user acquisition here, decline in new customers. That will come first. And then after they come in, maybe somehow they're buying less or less activity, or even after buying, and this customer buying less could be a higher cart abandonment rate. So that could be one issue in the funnel, or it could be a checkout process issue. So this kind of rolls up to customer buying less, and then after buying, maybe the experience wasn't satisfying, so they churn. So I think if we kind of lay it down, especially for e-commerce where funnels are very important, if you kind of lay it down in a funnel, I think that's
Okay.
will probably make it a little more clear. Yeah. And I'll structure the following and narrow down the possibilities. Gather data for week-over-week on total orders and conversion process to identify a few cohorts. Look into the internal factors of the product and company. Look into the customer journey, external factors, summary, and recommendations. Okay. Look into the data for week-over-week on the total orders and conversion process and a few cohorts. If there is any dip in the sales, any of the above, I would like to further analyze my data to formulate the hypothesis. My assumption is the sales drop is across all the cohorts, and this is as well. Rules out there is no bug with metric supporting. Cool. Assuming that this no reporting bug, which could be an issue. So it's good that you mentioned that. And this is kind of a broader bucket to understand the cohorts: geo, devices, browsers, product line. Cool, makes sense. And yeah, and the assumption is that there isn't a specific cohort. Makes sense. I would look into a few internal factors. Do introduce any new features, bug fixes? Cool. As a tech ops system is to check the logs to rule out the infrastructure issues. Is there any change to catalog products? Okay. Check with the abandoned cart manager to see if the drop is due to cart amendment. Cool. Checking with marketing if there is any promotions have ended. Cool. Do witness any upgrade for the existing product lines, which is cannibalizing. In this case, we need to refine pricing strategy for older generation products. Yeah, this could be maybe ruled out since we mentioned there isn't like a specific product line that's affected, but maybe we launching multiple product lines, so makes sense. Gross merchandising volume, does that remain constant or is there a dip in the volume? Cool. Now coming to the customer journey or placing the order below are the things I would like to. Okay. And here you kind of address the funnel, type of funnel, churn, cart or log, issue with payment process or payment rails. Okay. Makes sense. External factors, natural causes, competitors, PR issue, specific country issue, or sanctions for her global products. Yeah, and this is kind of specific to new product issue. Okay. Usually, when you mention these external factors, so these questions are assumed in the case you're working with the data analyst, you're trying to look at the internal data. I think a natural follow-up is, okay, competitor launched a new product. What is the internal data that we can point to that could kind of tell us what's going on? Natural causes, like what could we look at data-wise to understand this? PR issues too. Would it probably affect all this would probably affect user churn and acquisition. Natural causes, I think probably there won't be any, maybe new user acquisition too, but in general, like overall, all the engagement, all the metrics will probably go down if that's the case. Competitor, I think if that's the case, churn and acquisition will be impacted. So, and whenever you want to talk about external factors, I think it's always beneficial to kind of tie those to the internal metrics that we can take a look at. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. And summary, probable reason would be, is there a better price available for third-party sellers? Okay. Key recommendation. So I mean, this is like a limitation of a written answer. Since we haven't really assumed or picked or kind of gave an answer for each of these questions, I am not sure how you got to these summaries or recommendations.
One of the primary reason is the gross merchandising volume, right? So the volume that you already sold, even if you sold from an e-commerce site versus from the third-party sellers, it always remains constant.
So that is an answer to this question, but have you noted that somewhere here?
Yeah. So gross merchandise volume does not remain constant or is a dip in the volume, right? Or is
so this is a question, but I wasn't sure if you answered it. There's a dip or it's remained constant. So that wasn't clear whether. Yeah. So it's all about. So you're asking all the right questions. It's all about connecting the dots now. And whenever I ask this question, kind of clarify why you're asking that question. Do you get an answer? Analyze. Okay, from that I know that is the case. So that means these are true, and as a result, I could assume this. I think that's like kind of a logical flow that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to do so in written answer, but next time maybe for each question you can kind of add a section about, okay, for this is the answer and that means this kind of thing. And like, yeah, but I know that you kind of know the flow, but it was kind of a written answer format thing. But that's something that wasn't super clear. So feedback here is pretty simple. Let's see. You're asking great questions. Perhaps I'd recommend adding more elaboration or explanation around why we're asking some of these questions and what each answer could imply or mean, and how that would influence your future assumptions. You are naturally looking at things through e-commerce user funnel, acquisition, purchase, and within purchase it's decision, cart, checkout, perhaps, and churn and retention. So stating these and bucketing your questions and more clearly into these buckets, into this funnel stages could help bring more clarity to your overall answer. And yeah, there was a disconnect between the questions you asked and the summary recommendation section, perhaps because this was a written answer. You could make sure you point out each assumption, why it's important, and what they would mean, so that the connection between the data points and your next assumptions and I guess your next hypothesis and recommendations are clear. That makes sense. Cool. I think that's like a high level feedback I had. Any question here, guys?
Yeah, I have a question. On your second point, could you please explain what you meant by acquisition?
Yeah, acquisition is getting new users. So if you think about e-commerce, the funnel, you have to get new users somewhere on top of the existing users. They'll kind of come into that determines your top of funnel, if you think about it as a funnel. And then they will kind of come onto the site, do all these things, buy stuff, and then they will churn. So it's like a little cycle. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it means acquiring new users and not I thought it was like having more number of users logging into the system more often. It's not like that.
No. So acquisition is for new users, and churn and retention is for existing users, and combined together, yeah, will determine that overall number.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add there? Any questions?
No, I think I like that. I think I should structure a little bit and a little bit elaborate. That's what I felt. Yep.
Yeah. It's I noticed that also answer is pretty long. So yeah, adding that kind of structure would kind of help clarify that a little bit more. And also,
and I thought that adding that would make it more long.
right. Or at least it will make it a little more clear. But yeah. And also, you'll be speaking about these in a video interview or phone interview. So I think having a little more clear structure, I think, would help you there too.
Yeah,
But,
and Michelle, I have a general question. Like, structures for answers like this, right? Execution, strategy, metrics. Uh, what do you think the benchmark for time should be?
benchmark of time for which question?
For any execution metrics or these kind of questions.
I'll usually say 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We gone through the questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that is how you can structure your answer better.
Right.
If it is like a 5-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute answer, so
Right.
you have to jump into conclusions a lot faster than you could elaborate. Okay.
Totally. It's one of the features we were trying to add maybe to this forum about like a timer thing, because it's usually with the written answer, you get all the liberty of taking time, maybe even Googling some of the data insights, but that may not be the most conducive to practice for actual interviews. So maybe we'll add like a little timer is there so you can set 15-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute for each answer. Try to kind of put that same pressure to your answers. Would that be helpful? I don't know.
Actually, that is a good improvement.
Okay, cool. Anyone else or?
Yeah, but you need to buffer in the time, the way you explain versus the time you type.
Totally. Yeah, totally. So just so probably be just for your sake. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we kind of gone through 3 questions today. Anything else, guys? Maybe one last question I could help answer, or any general question, or I could probably just address one of the recently answered questions.
Could you answer any of the unanswered strategy questions, product strategy questions?
Okay. Let me see if there's a strategy.
Any of the newest ones?
Sure. Should Airbnb make it a requirement for all hosts to use professional pictures for their listings? I think that's interesting. Cool. You're a PM on Airbnb. How would you decide if you should make it a requirement for all hosts to use professional pictures for their listings? To clarify, these could be both new listings as well as asking hosts to replace their existing listings with professional photos, right? Assuming so. Let's first discuss what the intention goal is here. We can frame a hypothesis and see how we can validate the hypothesis to make a decision. Guests will try to search for properties by primary criteria like price, but how many guests? Okay, location, ratings. Ratings could be from the guests who say guests might pick a property with better images when everything else is equal, right? Or I would even argue that some people care more about the photos than some of these criteria, maybe except for price and location, or even ratings. But yeah, so in cases where they don't have enough reviews, right, they might rely on photos to make that choice. Property with excellent photos might be more likely to be considered and booked by their guests compared to property without good images, all else being equal. However, forcing your host to add professional images will add friction on the end of host. Many amateur hosts, and especially new ones, might drop off listing their properties because of the additional friction. I agree with that. So basically, this is the trade-off that we're trying to make. So I need an A/B test. Okay. First, quantify how much increase in your conversion rate can better image bring, and then try to ramp up a program that can enable existing hosts to add professional images first. Maybe we can also think of this as a marketing cost, sure, and can co-pay for the professional images. Next step in the ramp up, we can increase the restriction to all or some tiered hosts. For the A/B test, I use a segment of guests that are relatively new to Airbnb, and for one set, show professional quality images, and control Google contain non-professional images. It just might be difficult to get. It limits the number of photos and measure how more or better quality photos impact the click-through and conversion rate. Okay, so this makes sense. Obviously, this is something that we can test. We probably should test. Again, I think a similar feedback to Patrick. This is in an interview setting, and you will probably not be able to run an A/B test. So for a decision to be made, I think with limited data, I think making assumption about what is more important for the company, for the product is important. So I think even if that's the case, mention that we'll run A/B tests, and this is the type of A/B test that I want to run. That kind of shows your analytical rigor and how you think through these things. But also, don't just stop there and say I'll have to wait for the test results. Say I assume that the results will be this, and this is more important strategically for the company. So I think we should do this. And these are the caveats that I want to monitor for. So here, the choices are pretty clear. The trade-offs are pretty clear. One is getting better conversion. And honestly, this A/B test, control group that are new to Airbnb, if they're looking at professional images versus poor quality taken by just amateur hosts, I'm almost certain that a control group with professional images will probably convert better. And this, I could be wrong, but this is probably a test that is not really testing what we're looking for. We have to test the whole assumption, which is that yes, it will convert better, but also the trade-off here is that there will be less people uploading stuff on Airbnb. So maybe a better test here could be actually just run it amongst. Could you mute yourself, or did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So since this is a product strategy question, right? So it's more like a trade-off. Why should we be doing this, right?
Yeah, it's kind of an analytical flavor too. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would it drive the business goals for Airbnb? Would it drive more customers or more repeat customers? And would it improve the quality of hosts? So these are something questions that I mean, it should be strategically taken into account as well.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So in general, I think this answer, Pravin, kind of took off like a experiment design, more analytical angle, which is fine. You could mention that, but like in the context of product strategy, I want Pravin to talk more about the different factors and make more assumptions and kind of suggest a position that is strategically sound for the company in general, as you said. So feedback here mostly is it's great that you notice there is a clear trade-off between conversion versus host engagement and acquisition. I understand that you won't have all the data, and this is something that we can run tests to help the decision making. But in the context of a product strategy question interview, I want you to make more assumptions yourself. What do you think? What do you think is more important for the company? What do you think will be the results of the test you run? Make more assumptions yourself, and consider different players and factors.
Yeah.
And goals, and choose a side that you can defend, with caveats in mind. Lastly, the test you design, I presume, has an already determined outcome. It's most likely that guests will prefer places with better, more professional pictures. The test is not really testing for the trade-off in question. I think there is a better way to test things that we are really curious about. Conversion versus host engagement acquisition. And this could be just like a whitelist, or we could just ramp to 0.5%, 1%, a certain region, and try to do this, and then see if any hosts less engage, or if there's a meaningful conversion engagement. Or you could even say, like, as I think Dev kind of alluded, and different players practice goals for Airbnb. Yes, professional photos could convert better, but we care about belonging everywhere. We want everyone, your local moms and pops, to be able to just quickly upload things and host you, and that matters more as a company. It's about homes. It's about the local experiences. We don't. While it's better to have better photos, we care about that homeness more, and that, I think, is a bigger strategy to go after. So you could even make a case there, like saying, while we know that better professional photos convert more, we want more host to host. We want things to feel more homely than even professional. So I think this is, I think we should not require all hosts to use professional photos. I think that's a perfectly acceptable angle here as well. Cool. So we have 3 minutes, and I have a hard stop at 6. Any last minute questions about this question or anything else, guys?
Yeah, I have a question here. So for a question like this, is it okay for the interviewer to ask, like, here, would that be a strategy versus an analytical question here?
Yeah, like definitely ask, do you want me to approach this in a more of high level strategy, or do you want me to like design an A/B test? Because I think this is something that we can test.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Any more questions, guys?
Yeah. Is there a repositories of these recordings to view? This is the first time I joined.
Yeah, so I've been recording these starting last week. Last week's videos had some problems with editing, so I am hoping that maybe this one we can start posting up probably within the community. So I'll let you know, but we have a recording.
Thank you.
Cool. Any more question, guys? Oh, schedule my first round with Facebook. Should I prep or behavioral? Probably not for first round, I would presume. Did your interviewer, or did your HR correspondent kind of tell you what's gonna be asked, or they usually send out prep material? Maybe just get your stories ready, but I don't think leadership and drive will be the primary assessment here. They will probably ask, like, tell me about yourself a little bit, so get that story ready. But I think it will be, yeah, mostly just typical product interview. Yeah, and Kevin says leadership is usually for onsite. So yeah, so I think less emphasis on leadership and drive, but more for just general these product interviews. Cool. Awesome. I'll call it a session today, and thank you, everyone. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't understand.